a high level overview of what your P&L looks like is you have your top line revenue, and keep in mind, we're looking at this in percentages. And so that's going to be 100% of your earnings. Okay. And we're just going to use round numbers for this.
I feel like you need a whiteboard.
Nah.
Like, I feel like we should, have one right here.
Nah, we can just talk through it. So your top line revenue is 100% of the money that you have to work with.
Yep.
Okay. So if you made $100,000 in sales last month, that's your top line revenue. That is 100% of the money you have to work with. Now, you're going to spend that money on materials to install whatever you sold, labor to install whatever you sold, and subcontractors to install whatever you sold.
Yep.
Okay. Those are the three expenses that you're going to have, what Dave was just referring to as above the line. So you have top line revenue minus materials, minus field labor, minus subcontractors, and that leaves you with gross profit.
Feel free to pause, go back, and write that down.
Yeah, you might have to write this down a little bit.
Like, that's going to be a lot of information in a short amount of time.
Gross profit, if you're picturing this in like a report side of things, picture a big giant black line under the word gross profit. And so as we refer to expenses as above the line expenses or below the line expenses, above the line expenses are costs of goods sold. They're expenses that you have simply because you sold something. Below the line expenses are expenses that you have whether you make a sale or not. Okay? Right. Your phone bill, your CRM monthly expense.
Insurance.
Whether it's Field Pulse, Service Titan, House Call Pro, Jobber, any of them.
Car payments.
Car payments. Insurance, permits, not permits, licensing. Permits a lot of times fall under material.
Yearly licensing.
But
yes.
your licensing renewals, your permits, your shop lease, if you got to put tires on a van, those are none of that is cost of goods sold. Those are all overhead expenses.
Yes,
good.
They are overhead
Lord.
Expenses.
I hate group texts.
Just hey, you know what?
No,
just give me the damn phone. I'll keep it over here. You don't need it.
I need to leave it on.
I need to. I wasn't going to turn it off and just not allow you to use it.
No, I need to hear it when it's going off. But so we've got above the line expenses and below the line expenses.
Yes.
And don't overthink this, right? A lot of guys will take like fuel. They'll be like, well, I had to buy fuel to drive out and make that sale. So if I didn't have to make that sale, I wouldn't have had to buy fuel. No, you're buying fuel to make the drive out there. You're not guaranteed a sale.
Yeah. Regardless,
so you're buying fuel no matter what.
Yes.
Right. Now, subcontractors, that's an obvious one.
Yeah.
You're not hiring subcontractors unless you've sold work and you have work for them to do.
Correct.
So that is obviously an above the line expense. Materials. You're not buying materials unless you sold work and you need to install them. So that's an above the line expense.
That's a good example.
Right.
Like those are easy examples. What are other easy examples?
Well, your field labor.
Yep. Field labor is an easy one.
I've got a plumbing company, right? So I've got 3 plumbers and 2 installers out in the field. They're only out there making sales.
Yeah.
Right. And the way that they're paid, they're only paid if they make sales.
Yeah. Which is why we tell you guys to pay them that way.
Yeah. And so they are a field labor expense. Now, other employees in my company that are a below the line expense. We've got Austin, our videographer.
Whoop.
He's a below the line expense. I got to pay his salary whether we make sales or not.
You don't want to be a below.
Yeah. Belows are expendable. I will say that.
Poor Austin.
We've got my salary. We've got my wife's salary. We've got our 2.
Hey, I've helped Smedley make money and I get none.
Yeah.
So you're above me on the rung.
We've got our 2 part-time customer service reps and dispatchers that are also a below the line expense.
Yep.
I got to pay their wages whether we make sales or not.
Yep.
Right. And so that's a high-level overview of the gross profit side of things. Now, before we go on to the net side of things, I do want to talk some percentages here. So as a general rule, your top-line revenue is 100% of your income.
Yep.
You want your materials to be anywhere from 15 to 20% of your top-line revenue. Okay? If you tell me I had $18,000 in material expenses last month, that does not mean shit to me. It doesn't mean anything unless I have the context of how much of a percentage of revenue was that 18 grand. Okay?
Yeah.
If you only sold $36,000 last month and you had 18 grand in materials, that's 50% material costs. You have a massive problem. Okay.
Yeah.
So we need to know the percentage, right? Now, if you have 100 grand in sales and 18,000 in material costs, that's a different story, right?
Yeah.
You're closer to the target number. The target number is 15.
Yeah. For easy math.
For plumbing companies, the target number is going to be 15. For HVAC, it's going to be a little higher because you've got heavy equipment costs, right?
Yeah,
you've got furnaces and ACs and
P&E for HVAC can be anywhere from 30 to 45, but most guys are like 35 to 40.
Right.
Higher ticket items, they require more parts and equipment to get those sales. Like, it just is what it is. Now, the profit margins are lower, but the numbers are usually the same.
The numbers are similar.
Yeah.
Right.
So you make 20,000, I make 20,000, but the percentage of profit for you may be 15. For me, it may be 6.
Right.
But the number is actually the same with the same amount of employees.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Your field labor, this is going to be pretty consistent no matter where you are across the board. You're going to get different opinions on this everywhere you go. The super aggressive companies, the private equity companies and all of that stuff, they're going to tell you they want field labor around 15% of net profit or 15% of revenue. I'm going to be real with you. 15% is almost impossible to keep employees. You're going to be 24/7 battling employees that are overworked and underpaid. And so I like that number up a little bit higher. I like it somewhere around 20 to 25%.
Well, ease of running the company, it gets easier the more you pay them as far as turnover and headaches and all that stuff. Yeah. And it makes a difference too when you're like, the bigger your company is, the easier it is for that percentage to be lower because there aren't as many high paid employees.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I don't want to get into the weeds with it, but like, what we preach in trade wins all the time is if you want to have the best employees, pay them the best rates. Right. And those rates are 20 to 21%.
The field labor side of things is always going to stay fairly consistent. The office side of things moves a lot as your company grows.
Yes.
So,
yes, it does.
But just on the field side of things, if you can swing it, set a goal of 15% for field labor. But I've found in my many years of managing people that trying to achieve that number results in a high level of turnover because your guys can easily go somewhere else for more money.
Well, it just turns into a revolving door.
Yeah.
If it's a company that doesn't have great culture and they're at 15 to 16%, people just roll.
Right.
Like it's literally a revolving door. 3 people came in today.
Yep.
4 went out.
Right.
4 came in the 2 days before that, and 2 came. Like, that is, like, let's be honest, it's an office nightmare. It costs you more on your office staff.
Oh, yeah.
Like, the turnover costs you money. You do not want to fuck with that.
Right.
Pay your employees well and keep them long term.
It cost me $5,000 to hire one employee.
Yeah.
By the time because they get insurance from day one.
I'd like to see that as percentage based on what we're talking about here.
You can't percentage.
I know
it's
impossible.
Get a percentage of that because it changes on how many employees you hire and how good you manage them. Right. In other words,
I know
if you're horrible at managing them, you're gonna have to spend that $5,000 several times a year. Whereas if you're good at managing them, you're only spending that $5,000 every time you grow.
Yeah.
Right. So
and that what does that do? Increases your bottom line.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Totally.
Yeah.
So
just pay them a little bit more and not have to fuck with it.
Right. Right. And then subcontractors is the only other thing on a top line expense, a gross expense, a cost of goods sold. And I always try to keep my subs at 5% or less. It kind of depends on, this is again, one of those things where if you really want to get into the weeds on this, we would have to have a private call for it. Some businesses are set up to where they subcontract out a lot of their work. And so their materials are going to be lower, their field labor is going to be lower, their subcontractor expense is going to be a little higher. It's just trading. Are we doing this work in-house or are we subbing it out type of thing?
Yeah.
And so ultimately the end goal is you're looking for 55 to 60% gross profit. So for every $1,000 you sell, you want to have $550 to $600 coming back into the company to run the company. And the way I explain this to people is even though we're all on the same team, it's the field team's job to deliver gross profit to the company. And then it's the company's job to manage and spend that gross profit efficiently so that the company's here next month, next year, and also the company continues to grow.
Yeah.
And so
so that guys have the tools they need.
Right.
Good trucks to run out of,
right?
Branding so that you keep work coming, all of those things.
Yeah.
I should have said marketing, not branding, but
all of it.
Yeah.
And so now that we've got 55 to 60% gross profit, now we start looking into some of those fixed expenses that you have every month, whether you make sales or not. So you've got the owner's salary, the officer's salary, that's a line item on my P&L.
You're getting it regardless.
And I share, like Austin's seen it. We do P&L meetings every month. I share my salary. The guys know exactly how much I make.
Yeah.
And there's guys that'll elbow each other and be like, I made more than him last month.